Good morning, everyone. We studied a portion of Korach. Korach is a very well-known portion, and today I'm sharing with you the second talk in the book of selections from the Kutei Sichot. We read about Korach, who is coming up, summoning 250 leaders and rebelling against Moshe and Aaron. Why are you separated yourself? Why are you taking leadership position? We should bring it up for a vote. It's not up to you. We don't believe that God has commanded you to appoint Aaron, to appoint Elitzaphan, whatever. Moshe is trying very hard to appease. And he says, let's be patient. Take your time to rethink what you're saying, what you're doing yourself. You are digging your own grave. In the morning, Moshe is going over to them, and they refuse to allow a conversation, and they are very clear, adamant that they are going to fight. So here is the topic of our discussion. God says to Moshe and Aaron, I'm reading the words in Hebrew and translate. Hibadlu mitoch ha'eda azot, separate yourself from the congregation. The congregation means the group of revolting men. Va'achale otam karaga, and I will consume them this moment. Rega in Hebrew is a moment. So he says to Moshe and Aaron, right, moment, 1 minute. Separate yourself because they're going to get punished. Moshe and Aaron pleaded with God. They pleaded with him and they said the following: God, Lord of the spirits of all flesh, will one person sin and you become angry with the entire congregation? And God says to them, yes, you're right, and I will punish only those who deserve to be punished. The words, God, the Lord of the spirits of all flesh, is not clear. Why did they need to say that? They should have said, well, God, will one person sin and you will punish the entire congregation? Why are they adding God, Lord of all flesh? What does all flesh have to do with our discussion here? Says the Rebbe that Rashi addresses some of the question. God, the Lord of all spirits and flesh, Eloi kol basar lechol haruchot, all the spirits. Rashi addresses it, and Rashi says, you know what's in their mind and heart. You know machshavot. Machshavot is their thoughts. You know who is a sinner and who is not. How is it possible to punish someone who is not a sinner? And God says, Yafeh amartem, both of you, Moshe and Aaron, you said properly, and therefore I will take care of those who are sinners in their head. This is what Rashi says. The Rebbe, all that is sufficient without the Lord of all flesh. What does all flesh have to do with us? Some say the Yerushalmi, the Talmud Yerushalmi tells us that if someone hears someone blessing God, blessing the opposite of a blessing, they must tear a garment. That's Jewish law. Whenever you hear, God forbid we shouldn't hear, someone using a very vulgar language against God, we have to tear the garment to show how painful it is. The halacha is that even if a non-Jew is cursing, we must do that. Not only if it's a Jewish person. Where do we know that? Because God, it says, He is the Lord of all flesh. Lord of all flesh refers to all humankind, all human race, and therefore all flesh refers to all humanity. That's Talmud Yerushalmi. Says the Rebbe, all flesh does not belong here, because they were talking about Jewish people, there were no non-Jews. In addition, there was another time someone pleaded with God about non-Jews, and he didn't use all flesh. Where is that? Abraham with Sodom and Gomorrah. God says at the time, I'm sorry, Abraham says, he says, Ashofet kol haaretz, the judge of all the land, of all earth, you would not do justice? He does not say you do not do justice to all flesh. He didn't say the flesh. He said you should make judgment, proper justice to all humanity. And that's where he's pleading with God. There is no basar, there is no flesh. Why over here they start, Ashofet, Elokei Aruchot lechol basar, the God, the Lord of all flesh. Why wouldn't you do justice? One man is sin, and you are angry with the rest of them. Do you understand the question? Ali, did you understand? Here is the answer. The answer is very simple, but it will lead us to a much deeper discussion. Rashi, elsewhere in this week's Torah portion, actually in this topic, Rashi says, Rashi brings an example. The Rashi, Moshe and Aaron turn to God and says, if a king hears in a town or a village that revolted against him, he goes in and destroys the entire village. He is indiscriminate about the members of the village. Why? The rumor is, or the action came out of that village, everybody suffers. Somebody is shooting from a building, a terrorist, the entire building should go off. Why? We cannot just go in and find out who. How do you know? You find the right person. Maybe he's hiding. Maybe they're lying. Maybe they actually rebelled, but they're hiding themselves. But you got, that's what, but you, God, says the Moshe to God, you know exactly every individual's heart and mind. There is no such thing as mistakes. There's no such thing as maybe. And therefore, there is no room to punish people if they are not sinners. Says the Rebbe, what Rashi meant to say is everyone sinned, but no one rebelled against God. There is only one. And that's why they say if one man, Aish echad yichta, right, Harry? One man will sin so gravely and severely to be punished in a severe way, Al kol ha'edah tiktsof, you got to be angry on the rest of the community, the congregation, that community. In other words, everybody else also had been misbehaving, but not with the same gravity as one man. There's only a single man who deserved the harshness of the response. But everybody else's punishment shouldn't be so severe, shouldn't be. Why? Because they are following. They were told they're going to be rich. They were told they're going to be appointed as tax collectors, as leaders. They will be honored. Every time there is a gathering, they will be sitting at the dais. There is whatever reasons. One man is the one who refuses to abide by Moshe's commands. Aish echad, one man, sin. You cannot be angry on the rest of the congregation in the same way. And that's what Rashi said. A regular flesh and blood human being king, when one sin and everybody joins or supports him, everybody gets punished equally. But by you, God, you should know, Elokei Aruchot, you are the Lord of all spirits, of all humanity, and you know their thoughts. You should separate between one man and the rest. Do you understand that? And what does God says? You spoke right. God says you're right. One of them will be punished in a very severe way, and everybody else will be punished according to their deeds. And as we know, only Korach, Datan, and Aviram, only those three men were the one who punished to be swallowed by the earth, which was a very, very severe punishment. The rest of them got killed. The fire came and consumed them. You're asking what's the difference?
They got the good news. They got the bird. Instead of being swallowed.
Well, this is a whole discussion, but the point is that God does exactly what the person deserves, and not just by association. As opposed to a flesh and human flesh king who hears this neighborhood revolted, everybody is going to be punished equally. You cannot just take everybody and take witnesses and testimony. You just make sure everybody get punished. Here God says, I will punish everyone according to their sin. That answers why is the discussion between Moshe and Aaron and God. But what is the flesh of all, the Lord of all flesh? Says the Rebbe, and this is a very deep discussion, and I'm giving it to you. It's just a taste of it. You might be left with more questions and answers, and it's fine, but you will be able to see the word why, as it says, the Lord of all flesh. That's all I care. So the topic I'm bringing here is, so to say, a whole different philosophy that many, many, many hundreds of pages in Kabbalah are discussed. Here it is. The idea of divine providence, God supervising and knowing exactly every detail that takes place in this earth. Rambam, Maimonides, in the Guide for the Perplexed, writes that Ashgacha Pratit means divine providence. Ashgacha Pratit apply only for Jewish people. Non-Jewish people or animals, plants, and inanimate objects, they have a general in their species. In other words, there is no supervision about the playground there because it's plastic. God supervises and knows exactly what plastic goes on in general. It's like a manager of a plant with 100 employees. He doesn't know every minute what each employee does. He knows in general the employees will produce so many planes every day, so many buses, so many cars. That's all in general. However, there are the Jewish people who are directly affected by divine providence. That's Rambam. Rambam goes on to say one more thing, which is very crucial. He says a Jew, when he sins, God removes his Ashgacha Pratit, his divine providence, and treats them like animals. In other words, God supervises and connects with them just like inanimate, just like plants or animals. Where do we see that? In Rambam, as we'll see, we are not holding by it, but we'll accommodate how Rambam came to it. Rambam says it from many verses. The one that's easier that I found is in the book of Psalm. King David says, Nimshal kabehemois nidmu. Are you familiar with that? I believe it's chapter 56. I don't remember.
It's 49.
49?
That's what we say in the house of the other.
We say that in the house of devil? Okay, thank you. 49. In chapter 49, King David says about wicked people, Nimshal, they are compared, kabehemos, like animals, nidmu, they are similar to. What do you mean they are like animals? Based on Rambam says, as soon as someone is wicked, God removes the individual protection and different class, animals. Animals is supervision by God, but in general, the species. What does that mean? It means that there is no protection and there is much easier for punishments to arrive on them. When someone is individually supervised by God, God makes sure to protect them that they are punished or dealt with exactly the way they behave. If it's in general, sometimes there is more, less, etc. It's not very accurate. So far, so good. The Baal Shem Tov is totally against that, and all the Kabbalists are against that. They say that there is Ashgacha Pratit, divine providence, at every single part of the universe equally. So when you see a leaf, that's the way Baal Shem Tov said, a leaf that fell off the tree, God knows about it, wanted it, and planted the way it should be. And even if a leaf fell on the ground and then a wind came and blew it the other side, it was because God wanted it to be like that. Sometimes there is a famous story. The students of the Baal Shem Tov said to him, prove to me that God is supervising every detail of the universe. And he says to them, come, let's go outside. A wind blew leaves off the tree, dry leaves. And then one of them kept flowing and flipping, and then it landed. And the Baal Shem Tov says, did you think that God did that? And they says, well, prove to us. He says, go and look what's going on under the leaves. They lifted the leaf, and under that there was a worm, and she was very hot. And the Baal Shem Tov says this worm did not have water. She was very hot. She needed protection from the sun. And God made the wind come, blow leaves, and one of the leaves had a specific purpose to cover that worm. That's why it was. So in other words, according to Hashem, every detail, based on that, there is no difference between a Jew and a non-Jew, between an animal and a human, between plants and animals. Everything is divine providence. The second Chabad Rebbe explains that the Baal Shem Tov and Rambam don't disagree. And they are discussing between two types of God's connection. And those who studied Tanya this week, it's exactly to the point. When God interacts with us, there are two levels of interaction, an internal and a all around. The all around is a very powerful one where it's all encompassing. Everyone is included. All of creation is together. In that way, says the Rambam, that part connects to the Jewish people and not the rest in the same level. The second part, where God goes into the universe and brings out every individual's needs according to their need, in that level, there is no difference between a Jew and a Goy, between animals and humans. Everybody gets equally the same. Rambam is talking about the Sovev, the all-encompassing. In that way, God is specifically interested in the Jewish people, and if a wicked Jew misbehaves, he's kicked out of that system. But the Baal Shem Tov is talk about memale. Memale means filling in and providing energy to each individual animal, plant, human, water, sand, etc. It's very hard for us to comprehend because we're human minds. With human minds, you cannot understand how God operates, but that's the way it is. Says the Rebbe, now we can understand what's going on here. Those men in that community are wicked people. It's just the degree of wickedness. Korach was all the way up there, revolting against Moshe and God. And the rest of them, they were persuaded to follow. In that moment, God's divine providence of the level that the Rambam is talking about was removed from them, because wicked people, as soon as they misbehave, God does not know every individual detail that they are doing. Therefore, Moshe is speaking to God, the Lord of all flesh. All flesh refers to memale, to the physical, to the materialistic part. And in that point, says Moshe to God, in that aspect, you are supervising every detail and you know exactly what in the heart. And that's very, very beautiful, the way God answers them. Now, this is a nuance about past, present, future tenses, but in Hebrew, it's very, very beautiful. Usually we say that God knows in the past tense everything that happened. Here, he turns to God and he says, you know what's going on in the heart in the present tense. And God answers him, I know what is going on in the heart, not I know what went in the heart. Galui ve'yadua, usually every time we thank God, we say in the past. In the blessing Asher Yatzar, we say every time we leave the bathroom, we praise God for creating and managing our body. We say Galui ve'yadua. Yadua is, if anybody speaks Hebrew, Yadua is known in the past. Here, God says to him, Ani Yodea. Yodea is I know now. In other words, God says to Moshe and Aaron, not only you're right, even though they are wicked, and they have lost my connection with them. They chopped off the wire that connects, so the channel was changed for Sovev, for all-encompassing, which is unique to the Jewish people. But as Moshe says, you are the Lord of all flesh, meaning that even a non-Jew is going to be treated with Ashgacha Pratit. Even Rambam agrees. And these men are expelled from the first one, but the second one, they are connected. Therefore, you should look in their heart and mind and see exactly what their mind says, how grave a sinner they are. And one gets, what does God answer? Ani yodea, I know, as in the present. Not an yadua, that I know in the past, because God wants to know that even though they are now in a very grave stand where the relationship from Sovev point of view does not exist, but from the Memale point of view, I am still in touch. I'm still knowing every detail of their behavior, and therefore I will punish one, and I will punish the rest according to the gravity. Now we understand there is no better way, only the Rebbe can explain, why they start with the conversation, Elokei Aruchot, the God of spirits, Lechol Basar, for all flesh. All flesh meaning we know that you know exactly what's going on, even though they have seen and now they don't deserve to be related to you in the level of Sovev. I hope I made myself clear.
Yes.
So before I address questions, I want to wish everyone a good Shabbos and
That's what saved
goodness.
Korach's sons, because God read their thoughts.
That's